Sometimes a single message changes everything. Not because it was perfectly written, not because it reached the right number, but because it reached the right heart. On a quiet night in a small American town, a young girl sat alone on the edge of her bed, holding an old phone with both hands. Her name was Lily Thompson. She was 8 years old, an age when children should be dreaming about school trips and weekend cartoons, not wondering how to keep their world from falling apart. The house around her felt different that night. Too quiet, too heavy. The kind of silence that makes a child listen harder, hoping to hear something familiar and comforting, but only finding fear instead. Lily could hear the rain tapping against the windows, steady and cold, as if the night itself was holding its breath. Her mother, Anna Thompson, lay in the next room. Anna was 34 years old, a woman who had spent years doing her best to protect her child, even when life had not been kind. Tonight, she could not stand. She could barely speak. Lily did not understand everything that had happened, only that her mother was badly hurt and needed help right away. Lily's hands shook as she unlocked the phone. It was old, the screen cracked from a fall long ago, but it still worked. At school, a counselor once talked about safety, about reaching out when things felt wrong, about telling an adult. Lily remembered a number written on a paper her mother kept near the fridge. She did not know if it was the right one. She only knew she had to try. Her fingers moved slowly, pressing the wrong keys at first, then correcting them. The words came out simple and frightened, just enough to say that her mother was hurt and that she needed help. Lily did not check the number twice. She did not have the calm to do that. She pressed send and hugged the phone to her chest like it was the last solid thing she had left. She waited. Every sound in the house felt louder now. The creak of the floor, the hum of the refrigerator, her own breathing. Lily stayed close to her mother, whispering softly, telling her to stay awake, telling her that help was coming, even though she did not know if that was true. Far across town, in a garage that smelled of oil and metal, a man named Daniel Reed was finishing his work for the night. Daniel was 52 years old, his hair streaked with gray, his movements slow and deliberate in the way that comes from years of experience. He had lived a long life, one filled with rough roads and quiet lessons. Daniel belonged to a motorcycle club called the Iron Road Brotherhood. To outsiders, men like him often looked intimidating: leather vests, heavy boots, faces shaped by weather and time. But those who truly knew Daniel understood something else. He was a man who paid attention, a man who had learned the hard way what happens when no one shows up. When his phone vibrated, Daniel assumed it was a mistake, a wrong number, a late message sent without thought. He almost ignored it. Almost. Then he read the words on the screen. They were short, unpolished, clearly written by a child. They spoke of fear and injury and a desperate need for help. Daniel stood very still, the noise of the garage fading away as memories surfaced. Not the details, just the feeling, the helplessness of being young and unheard. Daniel did not argue with himself. He did not ask why this message came to him. He simply understood that someone was asking for help and that ignoring it would be something he could never undo. He typed a response, only a few words, calm, steady, words meant to reassure, not promise miracles. I am on my way. Back in the quiet house, Lily's phone buzzed. She stared at the screen, afraid to hope. When she read the reply, something inside her chest loosened for the first time that night. She did not know who Daniel Reed was. She did not need to. All she knew was that someone had heard her, and for a child who had felt invisible just moments before, that was everything. Daniel Reed stood quietly in his garage after sending the message, the phone still resting in his palm. For a moment, he did not move. The sound of rain outside blended with the familiar ticking of cooling metal.
a rhythm he had known for most of his adult life. This garage had been his refuge for years, a place where he fixed what he could when so many things in life could not be repaired so easily. At 52 years old, Daniel had learned to live with silence, not the empty kind, but the thoughtful kind, the kind that comes from years on the road, miles behind you, fewer words ahead. He was not a man who rushed into decisions. Life had taught him that reacting without thought often made things worse, but this time felt different. The message from the little girl stayed with him. It was not dramatic, it was not polished. That was what made it impossible to ignore. It carried the weight of fear that no child should ever have to carry alone. Daniel had seen many things in his life, but there were certain lines he could not step over. Leaving a child unheard was one of them. He thought briefly about his own past, not in pictures but in feelings, the sense of being small in a world that felt too loud and unpredictable, the quiet wish that someone older, stronger, and steadier might appear and make things right. In his younger years, that person never came. Over time, Daniel stopped waiting for rescue and learned to become his own. That lesson stayed with him. Daniel hung his leather vest on his shoulders, the familiar weight settling against his back. The emblem of the Iron Road Brotherhood was worn and faded, not from neglect, but from use. The men in his club were not perfect, none of them claimed to be, but they believed in responsibility, in showing up, and in leaving places better than they found them. Before leaving, Daniel paused and took a breath. He did not know exactly where he was going. The address in the message was unclear, typed in a rush by frightened hands. But Daniel knew the town. He knew the kinds of neighborhoods where families ended up when options were limited and support was thin. He trusted experience more than directions. As he stepped outside, the rain greeted him without mercy. It soaked his jacket, chilled his skin, and blurred the edges of the world. Daniel welcomed it. The cold kept him focused. It reminded him that this was real, that someone was waiting. He started his motorcycle, the engine coming alive with a low, steady sound, not angry, not wild, controlled, the kind of sound that spoke of movement with purpose. Daniel did not speed recklessly. He rode with intention, scanning streets, watching houses, reading signs that most people missed. As he moved through the darkened roads, his thoughts returned to the girl, Lily Thompson, 8 years old, alone with a responsibility no child should ever bear. Across the country, many children lived through moments like this quietly, unseen, hoping that someone would notice. Daniel understood that the difference between tragedy and survival often came down to timing. He did not see himself as a hero. He had no interest in that title. He was simply a man responding to a call for help. In his mind, that was not extraordinary. It was necessary. Somewhere ahead, a small porch light flickered through the rain. Daniel slowed his bike, his attention sharpening. He felt the shift in his chest, the quiet certainty that he was close, that the message, mistaken as it was, had reached the person who would not turn away. And as he came to a stop, rain dripping from his beard and jacket, Daniel Reed prepared himself not for confrontation, but for presence, for standing where someone needed him to stand, for being calm where fear had ruled. Because sometimes showing up is the most powerful thing a person can do. Daniel Reed guided his motorcycle through the rain with steady hands, letting the road unfold in front of him one block at a time. He did not rush. He did not weave through traffic or challenge the storm. Years of riding had taught him that urgency did not require recklessness. What it required was focus. The streets were nearly empty, washed clean by the steady rain that softened the edges of the town. Storefronts were dark. Traffic lights blinked in quiet rhythm. Daniel watched carefully, reading small details that told stories most people missed. A porch light left on late, curtains pulled too tight, houses that seemed to shrink into themselves as if hoping not to be noticed. Somewhere among them was Lily. Inside the small house, Lily Thompson sat close to her mother, holding her hand and listening to the rain. Time moved strangely for her now. Every minute felt long, stretched thin by worry. She checked her phone again and again, reading the message that said help was coming. She did not know how far away that help was. She only knew she needed to believe in it. The house felt like a cage. Sounds carried too easily. Lily tried to stay quiet, careful not to draw attention, careful not to make anything worse. She focused on small things, her mother's breathing, the warmth of her hand, the memory of the calm voice from the phone. Back on the road, Daniel slowed as he entered a familiar neighborhood. These were not the streets people bragged about. They were the ones families moved to when choices ran out. Small rental houses, narrow driveways, porches that had seen better days. Daniel had friends who grew up here. He understood the pressure that lived in places like this. The address Lily had typed was unclear, but the feeling in Daniel's chest sharpened as he passed a house with a single porch light glowing weakly through the rain. It flickered, not broken, just tired. The curtains moved slightly, then fell still. Daniel felt a quiet certainty settle over him. He cut the engine and let the silence return. The rain filled the space where sound had been, tapping against his jacket and the pavement below. Daniel removed his helmet slowly, grounding himself in the moment. This was not a time for anger. It was a time for steadiness. Inside, Lily heard the engine fade. Her heart jumped, fear and hope colliding in her chest. She froze, listening. The sound did not return. Instead, there was a knock at the door. It was not loud. It was not rushed. It was firm and measured, a knock that carried calm rather than demand. Lily held her breath. The knock came again, just as steady as before. Something about it felt different, not threatening, not chaotic. It felt like someone who knew why they were there. Daniel stood at the door, rain dripping from his jacket, his boots planted firmly on the porch. He did not raise his voice. He did not force the handle. He simply waited, understanding that fear often needed a moment to release its grip. When the door opened, Daniel took in the room with a quick, practiced glance. He noticed the stillness, the tension hanging in the air, the child standing behind the doorway with wide eyes and a phone clutched tightly in her hand. His posture softened immediately. Daniel lowered himself slightly, keeping his voice calm and even. He spoke slowly, choosing words that would not startle. He told Lily his name. He told her she had done the right thing. He told her she was not alone. In that moment, Lily felt something shift. The world did not feel safe yet, but it felt steadier, like the ground beneath her feet had stopped moving. Daniel had arrived, and with him came the quiet beginning of change. Daniel Reed did not step forward with force. He stepped forward with intention. His presence alone changed the air in the room, not by threat, but by certainty. He positioned himself where he needed to be, close enough to protect, far enough to keep the situation calm. His voice remained low and steady, the kind of voice that did not demand attention, but earned it. Lily stood close by, her small hand still wrapped tightly around her phone. Daniel turned to her first. He spoke to her gently, telling her she had done the right thing, telling her that help was here now. He asked her simple questions, slow and careful, making sure she understood every word. In moments like this, Daniel knew that clarity mattered more than speed.
He moved toward Anna Thompson next. He knelt beside her, checking her breathing, adjusting her position just enough to keep her comfortable. His hands were careful, respectful, guided by common sense and concern rather than panic. Daniel did not try to fix what he could not fix. He understood his role. He took out his phone and called for medical help. His voice was clear and controlled as he explained the situation, answering questions calmly, providing details without emotion. He knew that in moments like these, staying composed helped everyone else do their job better. When tension rose again in the room, Daniel did not engage. He did not argue. He did not escalate. He simply turned his attention back to Lily, maintaining a protective presence that made it clear where the priority lay. Sometimes the strongest response was refusing to add fuel to a fire. Across the country, many children experience moments of fear behind closed doors, moments they do not have the words to explain. When a responsible adult intervenes early, when the focus stays on safety rather than conflict, the outcome can change dramatically. Daniel understood this not from textbooks, but from lived experience. The sound of sirens grew closer, cutting through the rain. When the paramedics arrived, Daniel stepped aside, giving them space while staying close enough for Lily to see him. He explained what little he knew, then watched as professionals took over. Relief began to soften the tight lines in his face as he saw Anna being carefully lifted and prepared for transport. Daniel followed to the hospital, not out of obligation, but out of principle. He stayed nearby, sitting in a quiet chair while Lily rested against him, her exhaustion finally overtaking her fear. The hospital lights were bright, but the atmosphere felt calmer than the house had ever felt that night. As hours passed, news came that Anna was stable. The immediate danger had passed. Lily slept deeply, her breathing slow and even, the kind of rest that only comes when the body finally feels safe. By morning, the situation had shifted. Authorities had stepped in. Decisions were being made by systems designed to protect. Daniel listened more than he spoke. He answered questions when asked. He trusted the process, understanding that true help often meant letting others do their part. When Anna finally woke, her eyes filled with tears as she looked at Lily, then at Daniel. She did not have many words. She did not need them. Gratitude filled the space between them quietly. For Daniel, something unexpected stirred. He had come to help and planned to leave once the crisis ended, but sitting there, watching a mother and child begin to breathe freely again, he felt a sense of purpose he had not known in years. Not pride, not heroism, just peace. The storm outside had passed, and inside, something new had begun. When people look back on moments that change a life, they often imagine something loud or dramatic, a turning point filled with grand speeches or bold declarations. But more often than not, real change arrives quietly. It comes through small decisions made in ordinary moments, decisions that reveal who we are when no one is watching. In this story, it began with a message sent to the wrong number. Or perhaps it was sent to the right one all along. A frightened child reached out, not knowing what would happen next, only knowing that doing nothing was no longer an option. A man on the other end chose not to ignore that call. Between those two choices, 3 lives began to move in a different direction. Lily Thompson did not become brave overnight. Courage did not erase her fear, but she learned something important. She learned that her voice mattered, that speaking up could bring help, that adults could be trusted to protect rather than harm. For a child, that lesson can shape an entire future. Anna Thompson began her healing slowly. Physical recovery takes time, but rebuilding a sense of safety takes even longer. With support around her and systems stepping in to help, she found the strength to imagine a life that felt steady again. Not perfect, just steady. Sometimes that is more than enough. And then there was Daniel Reed. Daniel did not set out to become part of a family that night. He did not expect anything in return, yet something inside him changed as well. For years, he had carried the belief that his past defined his limits, that some doors were closed forever. Sitting in that hospital room, watching a mother and daughter hold on to each other, Daniel realized that showing up for others had also allowed him to show up for himself. Over time, Daniel stayed connected, not as a savior, not as a hero, but as a steady presence. He helped with small repairs around the house. He checked in. He listened. On quiet afternoons, he took Lily for short rides through safe streets, slow and careful, letting her laugh again, letting childhood return one moment at a time. The house that once held fear slowly filled with something else, not loud happiness, but peace, the kind of peace that grows when people feel seen and supported, when second chances are given room to breathe.
Across the country, stories like this unfold every day. Many go unnoticed. Many begin with fear and end in silence. But some, when met with responsibility and compassion, take a different path. They remind us that we do not need to be perfect to make a difference. We only need to be present. So let me ask you something. If you received a message like Lily's, what would you do? Would you assume it was not your place? Would you wait for someone else to act? Or would you choose to be the calm voice on the other end? If this story resonated with you, take a moment to reflect. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your experiences matter more than you may realize. And if you believe that kindness, responsibility, and quiet courage still have a place in this world, consider supporting this channel. By liking, sharing, and subscribing, you help these stories reach people who may need them more than we know. Sometimes all it takes to change a life is one person willing to answer.